Hello, welcome to announcing HCL Volt MX. My name is Paul Withers. Just to give a bit of information about me, if you're not aware, I joined HCL Labs about a year ago. Before that, I was working for a business partner in the UK for about 15 years, working with Domino and Connections and all of the other IBM products as they were at the time. I then joined HCL Labs about a year ago, at which point I stopped being a lifetime HCL ambassador, although I'm still a lifetime IBM champion. And I lead the team for R&D and special projects. And one of those projects that I was working with from June of this year was the product that's become HCL Volt. So just the standard disclaimer slide for a start, because things may well change over the coming months and years, but this is the situation as it is at the moment. So HCL Volt MX has had a lot of press over the last month or so, and there's probably a lot of questions about what it is. So it's a low-code platform, and it's aimed at delivering applications for multiple experiences. So for desktop browser, desktop native application, mobile native for iPhone and Android and tablets, and also wearables as well. So HCL has been doing a lot around the low-code area. So just to put some context into this, now, of course, Domino is still a low-code platform. That's where it started off over 30 years ago. It was low-code before low-code had a name, in the same way that it was NoSQL before NoSQL had a name. And then we had Domino Volt. Now we've also got Volt MX, and also coming along is Volt Business. So Volt MX is the one that we're focusing on in this presentation. So you're probably aware of Domino Volt now, but where does Volt MX fit in alongside that? So whereas Domino Volt is aimed very much at the business users and at the citizen developers, so people for whom development is not their day job, but they have some understanding and the technical ability to be able to create a small application. Volt MX is definitely aimed at professional developers. So it's aimed at people who have a strong technical background, but not necessarily in specific technologies. Domino Volt is aimed at building web applications only, whereas Volt MX can create web applications, but it can also create mobile and desktop native applications. It can be used to build wearables, and it can also be used to just build the middleware area. There is some coding required for HCL Volt MX. JavaScript is the main one, although for some wearable applications, then you may be writing some small snippets of Swift. But whereas if you're building those native applications for the native platforms from scratch, then you're going to be writing lots of different languages. With Volt MX, then it's predominantly going to be JavaScript, so it's much more low code. And whereas you can start from a spreadsheet for Domino Volt, from Volt MX, you're creating an application in the designer, dragging the widgets on and building it up that way. You can't import from a spreadsheet and get an application in the same way that you can for Domino Vault. Speed of delivery, this varies as with any application development platform. It varies depending upon the complexity of the application that you're building. There are some of the early tutorials where you can have an app built and ready within hours for VoltMX. Typically, it's going to be a little bit longer. So let's have a look at what VoltMX can do. So one of the areas that has become more popular this year has been that you're not working in a store and trying things on. So whether it's shoes or in this case, glasses. So this is what VoltMX can do by adding in augmented reality. So here we've got one of my colleagues choosing a pair of glasses, and you can see that they're then superimposed on his face, and it's tracking him as he moves his face around, and he can then choose a different pair of glasses and see how those work as well. So this is the kind of functionality that can be done with VoltMX that can't typically easily be done with any of the other HCL app dev platforms. But probably many of the people on the call here have, like me, have a Domino background. So here's an example of integration with Domino. If you were on the factory tour and Digital Week, then you'll have seen a demo along these lines with long-term Lotus, IBM, and now HCL person, Samantha Darin. Samantha's not available here, but we've got another long-term colleague of hers, Ted Amado. So here we have the Nifty 50 expenses application. Just to give you an idea of how old this is, one of the design elements in there actually dates from 1987, so before Notes was actually launched. So here we've got creating an expense in the Notes client, and to show how old this is, the approve and reject buttons are still visible there, even for the person creating them. So Ted is creating an expenses form for his new pair of glasses, and he's being good and just saving it and submitting it. So that's the Notes client. This is now moving on to VoltMX, and it's integrating with that same Notes application, but this time from a native mobile application, and also including notifications via that native app. So here we've got Andrew, his line manager, clicking on that, approving the expense, and it's marking as approved. And this is pulling information from Domino and writing back to Domino via a Domino agent. But it's not just mobile phone applications. Here we've got an Apple iWatch, again, talking to Domino. And again, we've got that notification, and the person can scroll through that, and this time Richard is rejecting that. So VoltMX is about talking to all sorts of backgrounds, backends, one of which is Domino. So just covering off what VoltMX can offer around all of this. So it's about building once and deploying everywhere. So it's around minimizing the amount of development time that needs to be done. It's about integration and integration with lots of different areas. And it's about innovative interactions. So just to dive into those, building once and deploying everywhere. VoltMX allows you to create components or drag components onto the screen and build up templates that you can then reuse across multiple form factors. So obviously a particular layout that you use for a tablet, for example, is not going to be suitable for the layout for an iWatch. But it is responsive, so it will allow that to be used with a mobile phone, for example. And it will make sense to do that. Obviously, it wouldn't make sense to have the kind of layout that you've got for a tablet on a watch. But it allows all of the back-end integrations to be reused across those various form factors as well. And it also covers localization as well. We're also talking about integration as well. So the integration layer can talk to all sorts of different backends. So it can talk to SaaS applications like SAP, for example. There are inbuilt connectors for that. It can talk to standard CRUD databases as well. So here we've got in the screen, we've got an area that's wiring up fields to fields in a back-end database as well. Now, Domino is much more than just a basic CRUD database. It doesn't just do CRUD. A lot of the business logic is built within the database, and therefore it makes a lot more sense to have a more sophisticated integration with Domino. So we can integrate with REST services, whether those be agents or other REST services like Project Keep. And it can also integrate down with IoT as well. And this integration, it's not just an integration with one or other, it can be integrations with multiple. And it's about innovative interactions as well. So we saw earlier some of that augmented reality that can be done with VoltMX. It can also cover geolocation and wayfinding as well. So walking the user through a store to get to a particular area. It can also push notifications based upon beacons as well. So another example that one of my colleagues has built is something for an airport where it identifies that a user, that someone is still in security, and pushes a notification just to that person to say that their plane is ready for boarding. And also, as people are walking through duty free and get near a particular beacon, then it can push a notification of offers that are specific to that particular area in the airport as well. Wearables we've mentioned, and which are extremely useful to be able to build for those, and adding in chatbots as well. So there's a lot of advanced functionality that can be leveraged with the applications as well. So let's just talk about the platform and the architecture of the various moving parts of VoltMX. So the entry point from your UIs, whether they be on wearables, desktop, IoT, tablet kiosks, it will come into Flare, VoltMX Flare, which is the widget library and the API. Now, in many cases, it will do that without you as a developer necessarily realizing that that is a separate area. But Flare is what we're calling the widget library and the API. The area where, as a developer, you will get involved is this next layer down, so Iris and Foundry. So VoltMX Iris, that is the IDE. It's a desktop IDE. It's a React application that auto updates and allows you to build the front end of your applications. From that front end, you connect to services which are in VoltMX Foundry. So this is secure backend services and integration. Foundry can be installed on premises, or you can use the cloud version. So that's all then, and your application, once you build it in our Iris, is published up through Foundry as well. So that's all on a server level there, but you can also preview it locally as well. And behind the scenes, that's all talking to your ERPs, your SaaS apps, anything that you can talk through web services or REST services, any basic CRUD databases, and Domino as well. Notice that we've also got on the side here a marketplace. So there are already a number of templates and templates for layouts and templates for components up on that marketplace that you can use, and other useful components or composite components can then also be published up to that marketplace. So the product, if you're aware, this was part of a deal with Temenos from June earlier of this year to co-develop and for HCL to have exclusive sale to non-business sector and non-banking sectors. So we're still in the process of HCL washing it, but this is an idea of where we are with that washing. So as you can see, it is a desktop application. We've got some of the branding in there already. Once you get past that splash screen, then you can create a new project and target where initially you want it to be deployed. That's not, it doesn't mean that that's the only place that you can then deploy it. It just builds up some of those components for you automatically based upon the selections here. And then you get into the Iris IDE itself. So in this area here, we have all of our components that you drag onto the canvas in the middle and build up the look of your application. At this point, this is just giving you a number of screens that you can wire together. You can drill down into each of those forms. Like HCL Vault, everything is around forms. So your form is not related to a document schema like it is in Notes. Your form is a UI screen. And then from various buttons or from the form events, then you will wire in the data and services that we see on the right. As I mentioned, we've got the option to be able to run directly from here. We've got a link across to open up Fabric, and we've got the marketplace. And there are also hikes. So these hikes are in IDE tutorials that will walk you through creating an application and visually help you find where in the IDE you need to go to perform each of those steps. So let's look at the roadmap that we have for this. So March is when we're looking to have the first HCL washed release, and as well as all of the UI changes for the HCL branding. Then we're also looking at adding in a number of the customer fixes that are required. There's also a sample domino integration toolkit, which we'll come on to as well, and also enhancing the workflow design. Fabric has quite a sophisticated cloud-based workflow, a visual workflow modeler that you can build in there. So that's an area that we'll be looking to enhance as well. And then we're looking at quarterly cadences for releases. So 9.3 coming out a quarter later. Again, focusing on some fixes and integration with DX as well. And then the next release focusing on some closer integration with Domino, as well as more of those fixes and some key Temenos features as well. So as well as doing the development of the platform ourselves, Temenos will also be doing their development on their own code stream, and we'll be bringing in the enhancements that they do as well. And then looking for a year from now, then looking at the first major release of Vault MX. So the first major 10.0 release. So looking at Open API 3.0 integration, it's possible to integrate with Swagger 2.0 APIs already, and create your own integrations with REST services, but being able to pump in an Open API 3.0 spec and automatically build all of your endpoints, that's what we're looking for there. And some enhancements around database support as well. Some more work then around innovation as well, and enhancements around the documentation and tutorials. And in terms of enterprise integration, looking at things like OData and OAuth, and integrations with other HCL applications like Commerce and Unica. And in terms of the administration area, then also looking at making it part of Project Sophie to make it easier to deploy to any cloud. So the vision with regard to Domino, in V12, the focus is on integrating with Domino via Project Keep, which you'll hear more about from Stefan Wissel in a couple of hours. And that's integration between Foundry, the middleware layer, and Domino. Then in the V13 timeframe, looking at integration with Domino, not just via Foundry for the services, but also closer integration with Iris and Flare from directly with Domino as well. So looking at support for LotusScript within Iris and bidirectional toolkits. And this will be a new IDE for integrating with, for building applications that talk to Domino. And as with Iris already, it's an application, it's an IDE that can be run on Windows and Mac, and we'll also look at Linux as well. And then moving further on into the V14 timeframe, looking at being able to reuse the components from Iris and Flare in HCL Vault as well. So a closer integration between those two application platforms from a UI point of view. But what about today? Already available today up on the HCL Tech Software GitHub is the VoltMX LotusScript Toolkit. Now this is very much in its early days here. This is something that I was very heavily involved in the development of, and it's already been used. It was used for the agents for that expenses application, and we also had the benefit of it being used there, not by me, but by another long-term Notes and Domino developer and expert in the community, Rocky Oliver. So he took this toolkit, built the agents for doing the approvals and rejections. And this is about allowing you to reuse agents without too many changes. Obviously, there are going to need to be some changes because the existing agents that you have are not designed to pass content back to a REST service, for example. But here's an idea of the kind of code that we're looking at, and this is actual code that's using the VoltMX LotusScript toolkit, and it's about making it easy to consume what's coming in from a REST service, as well as easy to push information back. So we've got a new class here, the Notes Agent VoltMX HTTP helper. It's got VoltMX in the name. That's just because it's expecting a particular payload which we're recommending for VoltMX. You can also use that payload and pass it in from any REST service. This class can be used from not just VoltMX. It's also built upon two other classes, a JSON HTTP helper for REST services that are talking JSON, and an HTTP helper, which is built to allow more flexible input. So something where the body coming in is not just JSON. Obviously, if you're reusing an agent and you've still got the Notes UI there, then you need to know whether it's coming from the web or whether it's coming from Notes. So we've got an isWebRequest method available, and also it's doing some validation of that payload to ensure that it's passing in the kind of functionality, the kind of payload that the VoltMX HTTP helper is expecting. So an ID of the documents an UNID of the document that you're wanting to update. You can pass in a bunch of fields for it to update and update that document then with a single API call, update action doc. You can get a handle on that document very easily, because sometimes the payload might need some manipulation in your agent. So you can get a handle on the action doc, you can get a handle on the payload, you can navigate down through that JSON object with a lot of flexibility. And then you need to pass stuff back. So the payload is expecting a set of fields that should be returned, and with a single HTTP, with a single API call, add return fields to response body, you've then built up that response. And when it gets to exit sub, it will automatically send that response for you. You don't need to remember to call some kind of close request method to send the response back. Obviously, not everything is going to work perfectly, and you might want to throw specific errors. So the request may come in and someone's passing in a request to approve a document, and they don't have the rights to approve that particular document. So we've got the close request with error, where you can specify what the status code to send back should be, and a message to send back. So normally, if you call agents over the web with the question mark open agent URL, whatever happens, it will send back an error, an HTTP status 200. It will send back success. We're overriding that in here so that you can handle proper errors back in a way that a normal REST service would expect. So starting to wrap up here, we're talking about native mobile applications and progressive web apps. So building UIs in much more flexible ways. And also that integration layer. So we've got Foundry being used from HCL VoltMX Iris. Doesn't have to be. It can be used from anything that needs to call those services. And cross-platform. So not just a single, not just Windows or Mac, but not just iOS, but also Android, Windows Phone as well. In terms of the why and the where, I won't go into all of these different areas, but in terms of Domino, this isn't going to be something that the applications that you build here are not going to be running in the Notes client. They are going to be running outside of the Notes client and outside of the Domino server. But it's about being able to leverage the investment of the business logic that you've already got there. As with all of the other products, we've also got an AHA Ideas portal for VoltMX. As with everything else, it's the same approach with adding in ideas. So make sure you do a search first, because you can guarantee that if you can find an idea that's there already, it should already have more votes than your new one will have. Look to build the business case for it. So focus on the role that this benefits, the action that it needs to do, and the benefit that it will give. And try and keep the ideas separate. If it's a single idea, it's easier to track what's happening, what status it's at. it's easier to manage if not everything on that particular idea should be implemented. So that's everything that I had to offer. And here's the link also to request a free trial as well. So on to the questions.
Пол, спасибо вам огромное за участие.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Paul.
У нас есть несколько вопросов, и давайте начнем с вопросов в чате трансляции.
We've got a couple of questions, and let's start with the questions that we received in the chat of our broadcast.
Планируется ли или уже есть возможность разработки приложений на VoltMX с источниками данных из Domino?
Do you plan to develop the applications based on VoltMX based on Domino sources?
So
I think correct will be, do you have opportunity for users or you plan to add this, that they can create different applications on VoltMX?
So VoltMX can talk to any backend. So Domino is definitely a key area there. I don't know if there's a plan for any of the mobile applications that we currently build to be built upon VoltMX. But
Что касается VoltMX, соответственно, на самом деле он может общаться с любыми backend приложениями. Соответственно, конечно, Domino — это одна из ключевых сфер для нас. Что касается плана по мобильным приложениям, я точно сейчас пока не могу сказать.
Отлично. Do you want to add anything?
I think the main thing to add is that VoltMX is not a Domino app dev platform. It's an app dev platform.
Здесь я должен сказать, что VoltMX и это не платформа на самом деле на основе Domino, и для Domino это app dev платформа.
But we're definitely focused on making it easier to integrate with Domino from VoltMX.
Но мы, конечно, будем работать над тем, чтобы интеграция между Volt Domino и Domino происходила удобнее.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much. Next question.
Для VoltMX нужен отдельный сервер для установки или его можно будет установить на один сервер вместе с Domino?
Do we have to have a separate server to install VoltMX, or can it be installed on the same server from which we run Domino?
It is a separate server. Whereas HCL Domino Vault was what was HCL Leap running on Domino. This is separate. We are looking at ways to make it easier to deploy VoltMX and Domino alongside one another. So stay tuned for that.
Да, здесь, отвечая на ваш вопрос, нужен будет отдельный сервер. Если говорить о HCL Domino Vault, там можно было работать на одном сервере с Domino, но здесь нужен будет отдельный сервер, как я уже сказал, и мы также будем в дальнейшем разрабатывать возможности по тому, как упростить этот процесс, чтобы они работали параллельно.
I think the other thing to mention is that deploying products via Sophie is extremely easy. It's much easier than it would have been if you're installing it manually. So I saw a demo earlier in the week of installing a DX server via Sophie, and it's just basic configuration, which for anyone who's tried to install DX, and it's probably similar to connections, I guess, because they're both based upon WebSphere. Actually installing those products is extremely difficult. So Sophie will be a big game changer for being able to deploy these servers in a much easier way.
Должен здесь сказать, что когда мы говорим о развертывании продуктов, таких сложных, как DX и так далее, все это намного легче делать через Софи, а не вручную, естественно. На самом деле, я недавно видел демо того, как устанавливается DX-сервер через Софи, и это все выглядит достаточно просто. Это достаточно basic, то есть базовая конфигурация. В отличие от того, если мы все делаем вручную, то, конечно, это будет очень сложный процесс. Я думаю, что это относится и к Connections тоже.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Вопрос.
Next question.
Vault MX – это только IDE как Visual Studio или это что-то другое? Какая система лицензирования?
So the question is, Vault MX, is it only IDE as a Visual Studio or is it something else? And what is the system of licensing?
I don't know about the licensing side of it at the moment. I don't know if that's been fully worked out as yet. If you speak to someone like Andrew Manby or Ofi Sorensen, I think they're experts on the licensing side. VaultMX is not just the IDE. There are the two areas really. So you've got Iris, which is the IDE where you build the UI. So that's the first element of it.
Да, что касается лицензирования, на самом деле я не могу прямо сейчас ответить на этот вопрос на данный момент. Возможно, вам даже будет лучше об этом спросить Эндрю Мэнби или других коллег, которые больше сейчас об этом знают. А что касается Vault MX и вашего вопроса в отношении только ли это IDE, нет, это не только IDE, здесь есть два компонента. Первый — это Iris IDE, на основе которого мы можем, соответственно, строить UI, да, или пользовательский интерфейс.
And then there's VaultMX Foundry, which you access via a browser, and you build your services and deploy your services through that browser IDE. I think you can actually also access those services via Iris itself, but Foundry is the server element which has all of your integrations. So that's the area that talks to your databases and that your application talks to.
И второй компонент здесь — это Foundry, или рабочее пространство, или, другими словами, мастерская. И, соответственно, вы можете открывать эту Foundry через браузер IDE, и там как проводить билд, то есть создавать непосредственно, так и деплой, то есть развертывать ваши услуги. Вы также можете получить здесь доступ через Iris, но самое главное в Foundry — это то, что здесь возможна интеграция. Это поможет вам как в работе с базами данных, EDB, так и с приложениями.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much.
Всё.
That's not it. We have some more.
Good.
Если это ориентировано на разработчиков, то какие инструменты интеграции с системами управления изменениями, например, Jira, существуют? Есть ли интеграция с системами хранения версий GIT?
So, if it is meant for the developers, then what are the tools of integration with the system of changes management, are there, for example, such as Jira or something else? And is there an integration with the version storages, such as GIT, for example?
So if you look at Visualizer, which is the Temenos tool that we're rebranding as Iris, it already integrates with Git. So that's already available out of the box.
Что касается, если мы посмотрим на наш визуалайзер, он был разработан терминос, и, соответственно, там уже прямо из коробки есть система, как раз о которой вы сказали, Git или GIT.
So integration with source control is already there. Everything in your project is flat files, and so you don't have the kind of problems of integration that you have with an NSF from Domino Designer, where it needs to be pushed out of the NSF into flat files that are then accessed, that are then pushed up to source control. It's going to be much more seamless.
Да, и здесь уже есть интеграция с source-контролем, то есть контролем источников, и этот процесс очень легко выглядит, потому что у вас есть просто простые списки, как бы плоские списки, flat файлы, вот, и таким образом у вас нет никаких проблем, которые могут возникать, если вы, например, работаете с домино, и это касается NSF и так далее. Здесь интеграция осуществляется намного легче.
Отлично. И еще.
Okay, thank you, and we have some more.
Yep.
VoltMX Helper – это встроенный класс будет, то есть вы будете расширять классы LS для интеграции с VoltMX.
So VoltMX Helper, will it be an inbuilt integrated class? And do you plan to enhance the classes LS for the integration with VoltMX?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I forgot to mention that we've actually got a webinar through OpenNTF next week on the 17th of December on the VoltMX LotusScript toolkit. So definitely come along to that.
Здорово, что вы задали этот вопрос, потому что на самом деле я забыла об этом сразу сказать. У нас на следующей неделе, 17 декабря, будет вебинар совместно с OpenNTF, и мы как раз-таки будем там обсуждать эти темы и будем затрагивать тему лотос-скриптов и так далее.
We're taking a very different approach for the development of the VoltMX LotusScript toolkit. This isn't going to be something developed just by HCL. It's an open source project. We want it to be built by HCL and the community together. And that's a very important desire that we want from this. As you saw, that it's already using open source libraries in OpenLog. So this is going to be completely open source, completely co-developed between HCL and the community.
И что касается этого направления, то здесь мы будем придерживаться уже совершенно другого подхода, потому что когда мы говорим о LotusScript Toolkit, соответственно, мы будем разрабатывать это не только в рамках HCL, но это будет такой проект open source, то есть открытый код, и здесь будет работать как HCL, так и все сообщество. То есть, как я уже сказала, это будет полностью open source, и таким образом мы хотим объединить наши усилия для того, чтобы разработать этот продукт. То есть это будет, как я уже сказала, не только by HCL.
I think there's a big opportunity here to change the way that open source is developed in Domino. Typically, it's developed by a single developer and it's pushed up and they continue to maintain it, which has a lot of problems, because what happens if that person stops working with Domino or their customer stops needing that? I think if we can get a team of people working with this, a team of people focused around it, then it has a lot more longevity, and there's potential for people getting involved who just want to create demo applications for it or just want to do the documentation. I think it's going to be a different way of developing open source, and hopefully an opportunity to reinvigorate the community around open source and around LotusScript and around Domino.
Потому что как вообще обычно все происходило раньше, что касается open source? Обычно у нас был один разработчик, девелопер, который, соответственно, это все строил, разрабатывал, и потом это все поддерживалось. Но здесь есть проблема. Что если этот разработчик, например, уйдет из компании или что-то еще произойдет? Получается, что здесь мы только надеемся на одного человека. И мы считаем, что с таким новым подходом мы получим действительно команду вовлеченную, которая будет сфокусирована на разработке этого направления. И таким образом мы сможем продлить жизнь этого проекта. И также здесь есть очень хорошие возможности для потенциальных демо-версий создания и для также разработки и корректировки документации. Поэтому мы считаем, что это будет очень хорошая и отличающаяся от нынешней ситуации возможность касательно Lotus скриптов и, в общем-то, всего этого направления.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Будет ли VoltMX совместим с предыдущими версиями V12?
So will VoltMX be compatible with the prior versions of V12?
So it depends how you're integrating with the data. If you're wanting to talk to agents or for REST services, then the VoltMX Lotus Script Toolkit, I think, would probably work even as far back as R5. The integration with REST services in Project Keep, then that's going to be more closely tied to version 12. So it depends how you want to integrate with the data, really.
Здесь зависит от того, как вы будете проводить интеграцию ваших данных. Если мы говорим здесь о том, что вы хотите, чтобы было общение с агентами и с сервисами REST, тогда на самом деле с помощью VoltMX Toolkit можно и к предыдущим версиям возвращаться и с ними работать. Что касается проекта Keep, то здесь это уже более привязано к именно версии 12. Вот, поэтому, как я уже вначале сказала, отвечая на этот вопрос, все зависит от того, как вы будете настраивать интеграцию своих данных.
And also XPage's X-agents have been able to do REST services for as long as XPages has been around. So that's also another way that you can interact with Domino data from VoltMX today.
И на самом деле, что касается XPages и X-agents, то на самом деле они с REST-сервисами тоже достаточно хорошо взаимодействуют. Это может быть еще одним способом, путем, как двигаться в указанном направлении.
Спасибо вам большое от наших слушателей за развернутые ответы.
Thank you very much from our audience to you for your very extensive and clear answers.
Thank you.
Я надеюсь, что мы скоро снова увидимся.
And we do hope to see you soon.